Okay, right. The first I see is Joan Rutherford. So, Joan, if you'd like to unmute yourself.
Joan Rutherford, High Peak New Green Deal. A while ago, I went to a talk given by, I think he was called John Kinderman. I thought I saw him on the list, but I can't see him anymore. So maybe he's left, I don't know. Anyway, I went to the talk by him, and there was discussion about a sort of retrofit roadshow that was going to be organised by, I think they're called LEAP, aren't they? And I think the first one was going to be in Tideswell. And I wondered how that was going and whether it was going to make its way eventually to Glossop, where I live, because I think there'd be quite a lot of people who'd be interested in going along to that. So I'm just curious to know whether that is still going and where you're up to with it. Thank you.
So I can't speak on John's behalf, Joan. I mean, because he works over at Derbyshire County Council, who obviously we work with, and yeah, I've known John a while. But we can certainly look to find out. I'm sure I saw something pop up. The Tideswell event was happening. I'm sure I saw something there. So, in fact, I think Sheila's waving.
I can fill in a bit there.
She might be able
the
to.
The Tideswell event did happen. It's being delivered by, this particular project's being delivered by Nottingham Energy Partnership and Marchers Energy Agency in collaboration. The second one happened or is happening in Nottinghamshire. You can put in a request for a workshop, and certainly we in the Hope Valley have, but I think it's taking slower to get off the ground than, you know, they haven't got dozens of workshops, they've only had the 2 so far, but there is 2 years, so I'm hoping that there will be more in certainly the High Peak area and Derbyshire generally.
Yes, I think that was you threw me slightly with the LEAP there, because that refers to, there's a few very similar acronyms, but that is being funded through the Local Energy Advice Demonstrator Programme, which I referenced. We really need to reduce the number of acronyms running around, Joe. But yes, that is running, and as mentioned, it is a 2-year programme, so that there will be the opportunity there. And it has really just started picking up momentum, that one, over the last kind of 6-8 weeks or so.
So it may be worth us making a request then. Is that what you're saying?
Yes,
okay,
yeah, and Nottinghamshire Energy Partnership are the ones leading that. So when the slides get around, there's the link and information there in the slides, so you'll be able to reach out, and they are really good. They're working with us on a lot of different projects and programmes.
Thank you.
You can also offer your home to be a case study, and I'm doing that.
Yes, I've done that, and I was told that they have a long list that they're working through, so it could be a while.
Thank you, Joan. Sheila.
Thank you. It was a really interesting talk, Michael. Yeah, so I'm a Tideswell resident, and we had 36 residences, if you like, at the launch meeting for the HEAT project, the Home Energy Advice Team. So this was their first ever delivery out, and it was very, very good. And I personally know of 5 residences within Tideswell that have already had the first phase, which is the surveyor coming out to the property. And actually they came and did our property this week. And Joanne, I think it is, we are in a conservation area, and it was very informative, even at this, you know, initial stage of assessment. So yeah, it was a very good session, very good talks, really good communication. So yeah, if you're in a climate action group, you know, or another group, get them booked. My question was, what can local community groups do to spread the word further? I think all of us here are doing kind of similar things with meetings, but we are meeting the same people all the time. How can community groups reach out further?
So, firstly, thank you for the first bit. It's nice to hear some of the feedback. As you appreciate, I've got so many different programs running underneath, and I get all the reports coming up, but it's nice to actually hear about it directly. So I'm glad that went well. The engagement side is difficult. In every kind of role I've played, you do often end up in an echo chamber. It's something we recognise and we work hard to do. It's a joyous occasion when I find myself in an arena where people don't really talk much about net zero, and I've got a chance to kind of educate and say, this is what's happening, this is how it links into your work. It's such a cross-cutting theme. What we've found to be effective, I think, is where we've been engaged with communities through the Community Energy Fund, is that there's been a number of different approaches that have been taken to engage with residents. What works well in one area doesn't always work well in another, but quite a few different activities have taken place. Some have found that the simple kind of leafleting approach has worked quite well. Again, it depends on the size of community and whether or not you want to use paper. There's different views on that. But it has proved to be effective in some cases, just getting out. And, you know, sometimes if there's opportunities to knock on the door at the same time as you're handing over, it helps build that relationship and understanding, as opposed to them just going straight in recycling. Certainly through the pandemic times, some of the groups got really effective at using their local social media to promote what was going on, and they had really good returns on some of the surveys they did off the back of their little Facebook groups. And then using things, I think it was the likes of something like Survey Monkey from memory, or something similar to that, to actually go, what are your thoughts? Because there's a challenge sometimes that it's almost like you're going out and preaching to people, and that can almost turn them away. Whereas actually, if you go out and try and go, well, what do you know about this? What would you like to know about this? And then they're coming to you and go, actually, we'd like to do this. This is the problem. This is the challenge. And then you're in a really nice position to go, well, actually, this is a solution to what you're talking about. But it's like they're almost led down. They lead themselves most of the way, and then you provide them with the answers they're looking for. And then, you know, some have taken the approach of running, as I'm sure most of you will have done this, is through your actual in-person events and having those groups. But as you said, they can often be echo chambers, and it is difficult getting people into that village hall or church hall. And it does continue to be a question on how we get those engaged. One of the things that's been quite successful in Nottinghamshire is something called the Green Rewards app. And this is where people just download a thing on the phone and they kind of log their good behaviour. So if they do recycling and they go, instead of taking the bus or taking the car, they walk, and a whole host of other things. They're often small things, but they actually add up over time. And then these things get turned into points, which get turned into prizes, and then they can go and spend them on the high street, because there'll be engagement with, I don't know, their local eco store or their local greengrocer, who might knock 5% or 10% off if you've, you know, saved 500 grams of carbon over the last 2-3 weeks or the like. So there's that sort of stuff that got rolled out across Nottinghamshire that was successfully, and we are exploring to see whether or not there's scope to do this in Derbyshire as well, because often it's sometimes those smaller things that lead to the bigger conversations.
I like that last idea. I think that's a bit of a winner.
So it's just getting the funding to make it happen. If we can find the funding, we can make it happen. It's not a huge sum. I think we probably need about 30-40k to do it, but we'll keep knocking on doors.
Thank you, Sheila. If I can add maybe a little bit of a puff for the Derbyshire Climate Coalition, or for the principle of networking generally, there's a lot that we need to be doing as climate action groups, and are doing. We have within the High Peak area, my home area, the High Peak Green Network, which brings together 7 of our climate action groups. And then operating at a slightly larger scale, we have the Derbyshire Climate Coalition. And we have here amongst our participants, people who represent that, both scales of that. And indeed, John Kinderman and in our own area, Gillian, who are engaged with and are keen to engage further with those groups. The timing of this particular meeting, just a few months before the mayoral authority comes into effect, this election's in May, is a time for us to be thinking about how we can reach across to our contemporaries within the Nottinghamshire and Nottingham City area, because I feel that we need to be sharing experience about engagement. We need to engage with each other to learn how effectively we can engage with the bodies that we would clearly like to hear what we have to say. So I'll leave that thought with you, and any help that you, Michael, can give, and anybody else I know who I see from our booking lists is from that side of the D2N2 area, the N2 side. Any help you can give to help us establish those links would be much appreciated. Now then, Dominica.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Michael. So yes, lovely to meet you both. So yes, maybe just to give you a bit of a quick introduction as well. So my role is a community manager and the regional lead here in the Midlands, working for Tomato Energy. So we're this new renewable energy company, predominantly doing large scale PV and also battery storage rollouts here across the region, specifically, across the whole sort of East Midlands, the D2N2 area, going into rural areas. Now, part of my role, and this is what I'm trying to do, just to add some narrative to the question I posted. Part of my role is very much engaging with local residents, local community interest groups, stakeholders, and that first initial engagement that we did launching our project across the region was doing the first briefings with all sorts of stakeholders, from the SLTs of the local authorities, going through to green portfolio holders across the region, then speaking to some community champions. So we've done that work, and across the board, very much what's been the common denominator and the responses that we've got from local communities have been, can you just do it faster and quicker? We just completely understand and are bought into the whole purpose that the company is doing. Can you just do it quicker? And of course we can. But I feel, and I'm new to this forum, so I do apologize for maybe asking complete obvious questions. But what's unclear for me a little bit still is, how can we really maximize on those ambitions and aspirations of the region, all of that funding that we have for all the large scale projects, and Michael, that you're doing such a great work as well across the region and speaking to different stakeholders. But how can we really maximize on that and bring in stakeholders into that real sort of collaborative effort? So for example, yes, you could have your likes of Tomato Energy and other companies doing their own thing, but you mentioned for instance that technologies like the heat pumps and collaborating with other suppliers, with other companies, to really truly do it on street by street basis. So I'm just trying to sort of think outside of the box and adding that real speed to the project so we can really deliver for residents, for communities. But I still feel like there are some challenges and blockers in terms of, for example, social housing tenants who are ultimately leasing their properties of the council. So the council will be the landlord and would be that final decision maker. And like you mentioned, Michael, as well at the beginning, we're going through some financial struggles with local authorities, budgets and cuts. So yes, so my head is exploding a little bit every single day. So any sort of steer on that and advice would be much appreciated. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. I'm also just going to scroll up to your question there, because there's quite a bit there that you expanded on. I mean, from a scale perspective, because most of this today has really been focused on, well, we looked at kind of street by street and some of the big picture stuff. I guess from a Derbyshire perspective, they've actually done quite a bit of work to look at how they best approach the larger scale stuff in their county, and other counties are also battling, I think, with large scale planning applications that are coming in for things like solar farms and battery storage and so on. So Derbyshire have done a piece of work that looked at renewable energy planning and how they manage this, and where things make sense, where things don't make sense. And when the local area energy plan does that, there's a degree of complementarity between the two. But I'd certainly say it's worth looking at Derbyshire County Council's website and the report that's on there. If I can, and I've got time, I'll put the link in the chat for that. But that step is really, really key. And the other aspect of that, it's not just the planning side, it's getting the communities on board and making sure that we're siting these technologies in the right place. We need them at scale. But equally, they've got to be done in the right place. And obviously, there are things. Again, there's been some incorrect statements, I think, in the press, particularly a while back, around where solar PV, for example, shouldn't be sited. And we know it's got to be on low-grade agricultural land, and it was being talked about like it was going on prime growing land for a short period of time. But I think it's making it really clear that this makes sense in this location and what the benefits and support are. And those projects that work with communities and get that community buy-in, and where community benefits can be recognised from these assets, I think are far more likely to be successful than those that kind of come in and almost try and get enforced on communities. So I think that aspect of these large-scale things is absolutely key. It's got to make sense to... We all know we need it. We've got to be careful of NIMBYism, yes, but also we've got to make sure we're really clear on the benefits and why we're choosing those particular sites and locations. So yeah, I think bringing the people on the journey is really, really important part of it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you, Michael. And I agree. And another challenge I'm having as well, so it's sort of twofold. So introducing the project in the region, basically gauging interest from people and identifying those hotspots where we could help as an absolute priority, but at the same time educating and trying to change the mindsets of people of that sort of, you know, bad rep of solar PVs. So that's another lovely journey that we're on. But yes, no, that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dominica. Joanna, that's Joanna Collins. Please.
Yes, hello. I'm Joanna Collins. I'm a councillor on High Peak Borough Council, and I represent Hope Valley, much of which is a conservation area. I should say we're also in Edale, where I live, we're setting up initially a community interest company to look at what can be done within our community on retrofit and energy generation with the support of Hope Valley Climate Action. But some of the grants that have been available, people have been turned down because they live in a conservation area. And although you can see why, if it's solar panels or heat pumps or whatever, the conservation area might be relevant. Some of these older properties lived in by people who are relatively disadvantaged haven't even got roof insulation. So I just thought that there should be a little bit of a push to make sure that the grant managers don't have that as a criterion in itself. It just seems to be that they're making it a criterion so that, well, really to make life easier for themselves. I don't know if anyone's got any comments on that.
Sorry, Janet, could you just qualify the bit? Because obviously loft insulation, for example, is a really straightforward measure, and there's no reason why it won't work in a conservation area.
Yeah, I mean, I think
so what's the key barrier?
Any sort of insulation, I haven't seen the applications, obviously, but or any sort of retrofitting actually has sort of been turned down on principle. So it's a sort of criterion. I mean, in fact, loft insulation is pretty cheap, and most people, or a lot of people, might be able to afford it. But there are other things which are allowable, but are just turned down without, it seems, in a rather sort of simplistic way. So
I think on the grant funded work, if we run at it from that approach, so a lot of applications will come in. The local authorities are managing this, so it's really at the officers with support from the customer journey, support people where the LOs choose to work with them, are able to take that initial filter of, first of all, are these people eligible for the funding? and then what is possible to do on the property. Now, there is that past 2035 process does kind of, or should in theory have result in a survey that takes place and kind of then provides a suite of measures that this is what makes sense, and in theory it should be done in this order to maximise the benefits, and in theory it should always be normally fabric first approach. And then the person who's managing the project will need to go, right, we've got all these projects, these are eligible, these are the measures. And then they do have a really difficult job to do at that point, because there are cost caps in place with a lot of the funding. And so, for example, they might, across a portfolio, the average is £10,000 per property. So they've got to balance these things off to go, that property might actually cost £25,000 to do everything. We need to balance that off with the solar PV project to help reduce the cost, or a loft insulation. So you've got a property that might only be like £1,000 or £4,000 to get the work done in order to get everything running at that average. And then there's also the placement of where all the properties are. So where you've got or are working in a small area, then installers like that, because they can go in, everything's in one place, they can set up their base and then just work down the street, next street is great. But then when you're working, particularly in areas that are more rural and often off gas, which some of the programs have focused on, then it does increase cost, increase complexity and logistics and everything else. So the officers are doing a great job, but it can be really challenging to get the right outcome with the scheme criteria that's in place and the funding balances that they've got to weigh out. So occasionally things do fall out that we'd like to do, but for whatever reason within the scheme criteria, they've not quite been able to work. Because there's also things like value for money that comes in as well. So if it's deemed as actually, it might need to cost that much money for that property, for a heat pump, for whatever reason, but actually that might trigger a value for money flag because it's well above the average for that sort of install. So they're balancing all these very difficult things to try and make a program that works. So they do have the work cut out, but that's the advantage of at least the devolution funding, is that there's no pressure on that sort of thing, that there's not a cost cap. There's a natural cost cap in that they're trying to get so many installs done with that 580,000, but they don't have the same way off of, there is a set cost cap of. So those things will hopefully help with a few of the points you've raised with that particular pot of funding.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. And hello, Joanna.
Hi. Yeah, I live just north of Derby, Darley Abbey, and I'm sort of local champion, if you like, I suppose. We've got for renewable energy, we've got a community energy group. We're trying to put a hydro on the weir at Darley Abbey. We're looking into that. That's how I've got into this kind of space. On top of that, we've been doing some work with Retrofit locally, running some little pilots with thermal camera, etc. But incidentally, we've got the heat project, the Marchers Agency, coming mid-March, so that's brilliant. So this is working because we've also got a lot of properties in a conservation area. So, you know, we're ticking lots of boxes here. We've got potential for renewable energy. We've got properties that are hard to heat. My personal question is, I'm picking up on what you were saying about the need for retrofit coordinators, Michael. And personally, I have some capacity. I work part-time. I'm now immersed in all of this. And I'm just thinking, perhaps I should train to become one, because I'm interested in it. I have a load of local knowledge. I'm interested in the approach of sort of street by street approach, you know, buying stuff for local community as a group. I'm just wondering, what's the best approach to get into that area? What sort of training would I need? Is there funding for it? Where should I go?
So through the hub, the funding is generally there for companies to access for their staff. We've not got something in there for individuals through community groups, though it does raise an interesting question with more and more active communities developing in the space. A lot of the courses do have pre-requirements that need to be met due to technical complexity. But what I've found from the community groups, the likes of you and others are involved in, is often you're all incredibly knowledgeable and have good levels of experience in this. Some are purely passionate, others have brilliant, lots and lots of experience in the energy sector in some way, shape or form. So without knowing your background, it's hard to say, but your closest one actually, I think, from Derby is the Retrofit Academy. They're just over the border from you, so it might be worth dropping them a note. They certainly have got funding from us to deliver courses, so while as an individual you might not be eligible through the current criteria, they will at least be able to give you a steer on what steps you might need to take. And they are a CIC, that they're not a company, so there might be something, particularly if there's a few of you that are looking at this, that I don't want to speak on their behalf by any stretch, but it might just be worth having a conversation. They're incredibly helpful, and hopefully they'll see the benefit of this. But that would be the start point, I'd say, is just have a quick chat and say, based on what I've done, would I be able to go for the course, and then they'd be able to advise on what it would cost. And if there is anything, they might get grant funding from elsewhere that I'm not aware of. There's a lot of stuff come out through various different channels, like Shared Prosperity Funding has put a lot of stuff into training in this space. So again, I don't know if Derby, you fall in Derby city boundaries, don't you? So I know they were ring fencing something for training in the green skills area with their SPF budget that they were trying to get spent this financial year, I think. Or at least I had a conversation about it. I don't know where they got to it, but it might be worth, again, just touching base with them and seeing if they are providing any provision and if there's scope for community groups to benefit from that. Yeah,
because I have followed the Manchester people powered retrofit and they're offering courses, and I just was curious because of course there seem to be a lot of courses out there in different levels as well. So to be useful, I'm just curious to know, I don't want to do one course and then it's not valued in terms of
we've put a few, as you can imagine, I've put a few people in my team have gone through it, but they've worked in the sector and also got relevant degrees, some of them up to doctorate level before going on to this. You don't need a PhD to do it, but they've kind of done the work in the industry and some of the kind of academic qualifications in advance of doing the course. But normally the retrofit assessor / retrofit coordinator courses, that they are highly valuable and they're the ones we go to. But I'd say it's definitely worth just having a chat with the Retrofit Academy, because they're the ones we've worked with most closely across both programs, the skills training and the actual delivery side of things. So they'd give you the right steer. Okay. Not that I recommend anybody, so to speak. There are others out there. I know NTU are building up capacity as well on the Nottinghamshire side. They've launched their academy recently as well. So there will be. You've essentially got provision either side.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. I have two more questioners indicated to me, and we only have about 3 minutes left. Notionally, I don't know. What I don't want is the system to suddenly shut down on us. I'm hoping we'll have a little bit of margin, but I'm not going to waste time now. Chris, your question.
Yeah, thanks. I'll keep mine brief. So I'm an economist in PwC's sustainability team, working with the public sector. Part of my remit is on residential retrofit and working on the delivery of SHDF2 and HUG2. So really good to see some of the data snippets that you put up there, Michael. Good to see that progressing. The other side that I kind of focus on is on skills modelling, particularly around enabling green skills. So it'd be really interesting, kind of, as you said, skills and supply chain completely necessary for all the funding to be used optimally that's available from government. So it'd be interesting to see if there are any particular skills gaps that you're seeing in the region, whether that's for specific technologies in heat pumps, for instance, or whether that's at different levels, so apprentices all the way up to kind of more senior engineers, or whether that's particular occupations. So yeah, I'd be interested to see if there are any particular gaps appearing.
Yeah, I'll keep it concise for time for you, Chris, but if you look on the Midlands Net Zero Hub website, we've mapped out the low carbon environmental goods and service sector. We've got that report on the website that does touch on all the skills you've referenced, or a number of the skills you've referenced. We're in the process, or will be in the process, for refreshing that report to bring it up to date. But the old report is only a few years old, so it will be relevant. And obviously there's the regional skills work I referenced as well, that will pull out more data, which we'll have available hopefully by the end of this financial year. So maybe want to follow up with in due course.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, no supplementary on that one. Good, we'll move on.
Thanks, Michael, and thanks, Michael, for the presentation. I think what strikes me as a local borough councillor and a local county councillor, what strikes me is the complexity of the funding streams. And I have heard of various funding streams before, but it does strike me as being multi-layered and also the other thing that strikes me is a lot of this does stop at the district council door. So often a lot of what is delivered is done with the district councils at the very, very heart of it. I suppose my question, and again, I can have this can be discussed offline if there are a particular officer or officers within your service that can answer this. It's just about trying to make sure that the districts maximize these different funding streams, and you talked about building up that knowledge and the danger of losing that, but it's just about making sure that they are at the table and putting those bids in and are across this in detail. I mean, I'm particularly obviously interested in Amber Valley based in Belper. So what can we do, I suppose, to find out what they're doing? Well, not to find out what they're doing, because that's quite straightforward, but find out what more they can be doing. So where are the gaps? Do your team know of those gaps that they could be plugging, and can that be shared in some way?
I'm glad you're from Amber Valley, Jez, because I can tell you your organisation consistently overperforms. You've got David Arkle, who is fantastic. I've been on site with Emmis, who's the leader of your council. And there's some very good working going on. You've got a good relationship with Westville, who delivers a lot of the work. So I will say this cautiously, because I try not to make anything a competition with all our districts and boroughs. But you are, as a local authority, a very good example of what a district can do to maximise the different grant funding streams and take the opportunity with both hands and deliver a successful programme. And that is in part because you've got somebody or a team in place that have been there for a long time and know what they're doing, understand the local geography, and have really got to grips with the ins and outs of the programme and how to juggle the different funding that's coming in. So actually, you're very fortunate in your areas.
I'll feed that back to them. So thanks, Michael.
It's an easy answer. There's always more that can be done, but actually, yeah, there's a good relationship between the two areas, and that's what it comes down to: communication. And the way we try to approach it is that when we've got a big bid that comes in, we say we will do the bid on behalf of all the people who want to work with us, all the local authorities, and then they'll send us the number and the data, and we'll collate it all and push that up to government. And it's proved to be quite an effective way of doing it. And we do then try and take that weight off, because writing funding bids is, well, obviously, if you're successful, it's not a thankless task, but it is hard work and it does drain resources. So by taking that off the local authority's hands, you can focus on delivery. And we try and then help. We do regular workshops and training with the local authorities to go, these are the rules of the funding. This is how we navigate them to get to the best end result. So there's regular meetings between us and the local authorities to help guide them through the process, make sure that they're maintaining compliance with the complex scheme rules and regulations, and that they're, again, with the customer journey support, are really helpful with this, making sure that the right people are going onto the right programme to maximise spend across the different ones that often run in parallel or overlapping.
Brilliant, thanks.
Okay, thank you, and indeed, thank you to everybody that's participated. I've not had an opportunity to monitor the chat activity, but I see that you have made the most of it, which suggests that there could well be the basis for an ongoing conversation here between participants and with the Net Zero Hub, which you are encouraged to take up. If I might take my chairman's prerogative to ask a question or make a point first, and that is, it's my belief, picking up a point that you've made, Michael, towards the end of your presentation, it's my belief that the notion of a net zero housing sector is like the search for Holy Grail. It doesn't exist. Housing has to be seen as part of a fairly complex interactive system of supply and demand. And it prompts me to ask, because I don't think you mentioned it, and forgive me if you have, the Midlands Net Zero Hub local area energy plans, because it seems to me that this task, for which you have invited tenders, and I suspect those tenders are now with you, we'll be looking at things at that sort of scale, the relationship between supply and demand. So is that going to be the subject perhaps for a future meeting that we should invite you to speak about?
It could well be. I've got somebody who's actually leading on the work, so I might have somebody who could come along and talk about it from a coordination perspective. But yes, I've done a lot of the legwork to get it all set up and running, and I think it is a very, very interesting area. Yeah, it's going to take a while before we've got something that is worthy of discussion, because as you can imagine, trying to pull something together across 17 local authorities is no small task. I actually envisage it's going to probably take us about 2 years. Because we'll do it, a section at a time potentially. Although I hope there may be an opportunity to accelerate it at some point. But yes, yeah, probably could be something this time next year, maybe.
Well, it's a huge chunk out of the time that our local authorities have got to meet their 2030 targets.
This stuff will be found out on the way. It's not we'll wait until the report is done. As I say, there's plenty for people to be getting on with in the meantime.
Okay. Well, anyway, again, I thank you very much, Michael, for coming along and spending this time with us. And I'm sure it will be the beginning of many interesting conversations that I and many people here will continue to have with you. And thank you again, participants, for coming along and making this such an interesting meeting.